Thank you so much, Margot, and thanks, Livia, for being here as well. I'm going to welcome our first panel of the day up onto the stage. Our first panel is around innovations and evolutions in employee ownership. So we're going to kind of take stock of like where the field is and where it's going and what some of those implications are. As Margot noted, it is I'm pretty new to this space myself, but it feels like a really exciting and innovative time to be involved in employee ownership. You know, you're seeing new models emerge, new models being adapted, and in response, we're seeing new financing mechanisms and new types of support services come online to help meet the needs of those different forms. Been an explosion of growth in state centers, obviously. And I think therein kind of lies the beauty of this concept of employee ownership, right? Is that it doesn't just mean one thing. I was thinking a little bit about it last night, and I kind of think of employee ownership as like this kind of Swiss Army knife, right? That can be used to solve a number of different problems. So my wife and kids and I go camping quite a bit, and my wife doesn't let me play with the knife because she's worried I'm going to hurt myself. But I see her get it out, right? And a Swiss Army knife, has a corkscrew, it has a can opener, it has a saw, it has scissors, it has big knives, it has small knives, all used to be solved, used to address different problems when you're out there in the wilderness, right? And when I look at employee ownership, I see kind of this Swiss Army knife that can be used to address a number of problems as well, right? We have different forms that are really good at sharing profits and building wealth. We have different forms and strategies for thinking about race and gender equity, different forms that are maybe better than others at thinking about how we provide opportunities to people who've maybe been locked out of the labor market and discriminated against, so like returning citizens, right? A new wave of forms that I think are really exciting and are coming online to think about how ownership can be combined with other social purposes. We have forms that are good for Main Street and good forms that are, better maybe for Wall Street. And as we're going to hear about in a little bit, there's a number of different forms and strategies that could maybe potentially really transform how we think about the care economy, so child care and home care, and how we can improve the lives of those workers as well as maybe the care that they deliver. So I think there's a lot of beauty and strength in all this diversity that we have, and I think that strength really holds the potential for us to think about scale, because I don't think there's going to be any one model that gets us to where we all hope to go in terms of growing employee ownership. I don't think there's one model that's going to really reach into all the communities that we know need ownership the most and all that comes with it. So it's a really exciting time, and we're just going to barely scratch the surface on this panel of all like the innovative models and innovative work going on in this space. We certainly could have probably had 4 or 5 more panels at least to cover all the innovation. So let me introduce our great panel and let them dive into it. And let me find my notes so I don't get anyone's name wrong. So we're going to start on the very far right of the face many of you know, Corey Rosen. He's the founder and senior staff member of the National Center for Employee Ownership. We do have more copies of his book out there. It's a great book, whether you know a little or a lot about employee ownership. I hope you'll pick it up. Next to him, we have Chris Cooper, who's the director of our oldest state center of employee ownership out of Ohio. Great to see Chris. And then we have Aki Soriano Versosa, who's the executive director of the Filipino Workers Center and an executive fellow with the Rutgers Institute. Next to Aki, we have Chris Adee, who's the co-chief executive officer of OwnersEdge, an ESOP holding company. And then a face many of you also know, moderating today's conversation is Mary Josephs, founder and chief executive officer of Verit Advisors. So I'll turn it over to you, Mary.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Rutgers and the Aspen Institute for assembling this incredible forum for conversation on expanding worker ownership. You are right, Matt. This conversation that we're having with this incredible panel could take all morning, but there's other exciting things to talk about, so we will try and be as succinct as possible and are excited to seed and share some ideas that are really working. I've been in the ESOP space for decades, and the innovation in recent years is exhilarating. One, fueled by the conversation of, as you said, Margot, this broader tent. And ESOP does not equal exclusively employee ownership. Employee ownership that tent is getting bigger and bigger, and it's exciting as we can meet an opportunity for worker ownership in businesses that previously didn't have access to it for whatever reason. So thank you. We're going to learn a lot from our panel. And Corey, I'm going to start with you. Corey, you get 3 minutes. Corey could talk for an hour. No, but if you could share some perspective over your legacy with ESOPs on why and what you're seeing today in terms of innovation.
Thank you. So what we've seen in ESOPs over the last now almost 50 years, this will be the 50th anniversary of the statutory creation of ESOPs in 1974. And when ESOPs were first imagined by Louis Kelso, the idea was they would be used as a mechanism to raise capital for large companies. You'd borrow money at a reduced interest rate. You would buy new capital through the ESOP by issuing shares. The employees would become owners. The company would get bigger, and everybody would be happy. And there were tax incentives to do just that. And then that wasn't happening. There were ESOPs being formed, but it wasn't being used that way. So Congress said, okay, we'll actually pay you, big companies, to set up these ESOPs because we think that you'll like that once you do, and you'll expand it. And so the first research project we ever did after I left Capitol Hill and started the center was whether that encouraged large companies to actually set up more ESOPs, to expand their ESOP beyond the 1 or 2% that the government was giving them a tax credit for, so literally paying them to do it. And we found that that was not the case, not even once in any of these companies. And that was then replaced by, okay, well, maybe what's happening is that ESOPs are being used to buy out owners of closely held companies. And so this tax credit was substituted for some other tax goodies, including a tax incentive to sellers to sell to ESOPs. And then that part of ESOPs grew and grew and grew until where we are today. And it's kind of equilibrated. The number of terminated plans equals the number of new plans. So a couple trends that are happening, though, that are encouraging. By far the most important is what we're going to hear more from Chris, and we heard yesterday from Daniel. There is a huge wave of ESOP companies buying other companies. So as ESOP companies mature, and they're not paying taxes because the government says if you're 100% employee-owned, you don't have to pay taxes, and these companies perform better than other companies, which we know they do, they're saying, hey, we can go out and buy another company, or maybe lots of other companies. And when they go to the targets say, that's cool. I don't have to sell to private equity. I don't have to sell to some competitor. And I know what happens when we do that to the people who helped me build a company. You're telling me I can get a fair price and my employees can become owners of you. That's a kind of sweet deal. So we're seeing many more companies being bought by ESOP companies than new ESOPs being established. In 2021, there were 423,000 more new employees added to private company ESOPs, and I'd say 70% of that number came from acquisitions. To me, this is the future of ESOPs. This is what's going to really get us out of this equilibrium state and into something really important. At the same time, we are seeing, as was mentioned, alternatives to ESOPs. I don't think they have any chance of really replacing ESOPs as a model because they're better adapted to specific circumstances. And it's pretty hard to give up all these tax benefits for basically the greater flexibility you get with these other models. But we're seeing private equity, for instance, a few, giving equity to everybody when they buy a company. We're seeing employee ownership trusts growing somewhat in this country, so that's encouraging. And we're also seeing more conversation about this idea, as this is one of the few things we can all agree on that actually works. But I'll just end by saying it's really frustrating to me, and I know to many of you, that you've got an idea that that means that employees have 3 times their retirement assets, they're paid better, they're 1/5 as likely to be laid off as in other companies, and everybody virtually in both parties agree it's a good idea, and nobody's standing on the top of the roof yelling, hey, pay attention to this. This is something that really could move us forward. It's relegated to a very third-tier issue. So that's something I hope can change.
Thank you, Corey. Given that, Chris, I'll come to you next. The Ohio Center for Employee Ownership I have been familiar with for decades, and you stand alone in advocacy, programming, and services for employee ownership. I'd like to share the history and why you think what some critical aspects are that make you so successful.
I'll share the history first. So we've been around for about 38 years now. So we've been continuously operating. Having a microphone would be good, right? Using it, right? Sorry about that, folks. So we've been around for about 38 years now. We're going to have our 38th annual conference here on April 18th. We're going to have about 400 people joining us in Akron, Ohio, for that. So our basic focus is kind of 3 major areas. I call it the 3-legged stool. We work with startup employee-owned businesses or business owners planning for succession and maybe transferring the business to their employees as part of that process. A big chunk of what we do is we provide training and education for existing employee-owned companies in Ohio. Thankfully, employee-owned companies, the number of employee-owned companies, I think Ohio, we punch a little bit above our weight in terms of population, in terms of the number. So we're very proud of that. And that's what our conference is going to be mostly about, is training and education for folks. Exciting for us is that as we go through each conference, it's more diverse in terms of its content. So we're going to have, it's very ESOP heavy because that's most of the employee-owned companies are ESOPs in Ohio. But we've expanded our co-op content, and we're doing some stuff with the employee ownership trust model and all that kind of thing. So we try to keep a handle on that. And the third part of what we do is kind of advocacy and research. So we are part of Kent State University in Ohio. I just want to say the Kent State University, right?
Nice.
Okay, sorry, it's my one joke, right? And so I have a colleague, Mike Palmieri, who's also a fellow here at Beister at Rutgers, who kind of handles our research side of things. We also do some public policy kind of advocacy work as well. So remind me what the second part of your question was?
I was why you've been so successful.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that people say, how have you been so successful? And I always feel that I get up every day realizing it's still a struggle to keep the doors open and keep doing what we do. So, I think we figured some things out. I would hesitate to say we figured a lot of things out, right? I think, a kind of a pragmatic approach is probably what I would ascribe our success to most, is that we're ecumenical in terms of model. We work with anyone and everyone. We meet whoever we meet with. We meet them where they're at instead of trying to say that they need to be where we're at, right? And so I think the other big piece is partnership. So in Ohio, we have a great network of organizations that are doing this work. We've started with other organizations, another organization called OWN, which is Ohio's Worker Ownership Network, is what we're calling it. And so that includes Co-op Cincy, Co-op Dayton, Evergreen Cooperatives, the Ohio Cooperative Development Center at Ohio State, a group called Cleveland Owns up in Cleveland as well. So we've created that network to kind of help us do work. There's lots of work to do, right? None of us can do it all. And so we've got a great network of service providers, the professionals that really, while I'm sleeping, they're out doing deals, right? And so they're building the infrastructure as well. So they're a huge important part. And I think a lot of it is the magic of the companies. I got asked a couple weeks ago, why do you do what you do? And invariably what I always point to is when I get a chance to go to an employee-owned company and work directly with the employee owners and the business owners as they're thinking about what's going to happen to their business and their legacy, those kind of things, sort of like the soft, gushy, emotional kind of stuff. It never gets old, and I can feel myself getting a little emotional right now because it's an amazing thing. So I think that kind of pragmatic, but also kind of a pragmatic dreamer kind of thing, an approach to what we do and how we do it, along with the partnerships is really what's driving our success.
Thank you, and congratulations. Corey, thanks for flagging ESOP holding companies. It is so clearly obvious that M&A or acquisition isn't the prerogative of just private equity companies or large public companies.
It's you.
It is me. Okay, so growth through acquisition is a tried and true across the capital markets as a way to drive share value, diversify, and grow. And what you guys have done at OwnersEdge is, I think, so exciting in Wisconsin, and starting with one at a time and building a team and a strategy and leadership around it. So could you share more about that journey?
Sure. I'm so excited, and thank you for the opportunity to share our story this morning. So OwnersEdge is a holding company. We are 100% owned by an ESOP. Today, we have 5 portfolio companies, operating companies in our portfolio today, and our current intent is to acquire up to 5 more companies. Our legacy company is CCNN. They're a cabling infrastructure company. They became 100% owned by the ESOP in the late 90s. So we have a very mature ESOP at about 25 years. And in the 2000s, around 2010, our CEO came on board and looked at the sustainability of that company, and they were financially healthy and doing very well, and thought, long-time sustainability, ESOP forever. What should we do, and how can we really continue to think about that? And with our executive team and our board of directors, in 2015, we created the holding company, and we moved that operating company down below the holding company. So 100% ESOP owns the holding company. 5 businesses or operating companies now owned by the holding company, all participating in one ESOP. So since 2015, we've actually acquired 8 companies to get to the 5 businesses today. So acquisitions aren't just diversified in our portfolio, we also do strategic roll-ups within there. But our intent of creating that holding company was to create diversification, counter-cyclical businesses, not all going with the economy at the same time, making sure, and in the last 5 years with everything that's gone on, that has proven very successful for our businesses. So in that 10-year period, our share value to our participants has grown over 400% in that 10-year period. And so we're continually thinking long-term, what does that look like as we continue to think about diversification and strategic growth within our portfolio? So just again to share a little bit more about those companies, CCNN Cabling Infrastructure. Baycom is a mission-critical communication company. They provide two-way radios, Panasonic Toughbooks to public safety and make sure that, and we're all based in the Midwest area, mostly within Wisconsin with 1 or 2 businesses in Minnesota. Our third company is QComp Technologies. They're a robotics integrator. So they work with manufacturing facilities to design robotics and mostly palletizing and depalletizing end-of-line manufacturing, specializing in the glass industry. Our fourth company is Impleco. We actually combined 2 of our companies to create Impleco, and they sell and rent audio communications. So now we're in a big event like this. Maybe there's thousands more people around us, and we want to just have you all hear what we have to say. Instead of the microphones, we're going to give you all a headset. We're going to rent it to the facility and provide that to you so you can hear that a little bit better. Now, our fifth company is the most diversified in our portfolio. It's a company called Ash & Spencer. They create and compose music for the advertising agency. So we've gone from unionized technicians to sales in the public safety area, engineers at QComp, Our Impleco team is a sales-driven team, and now we've added composers and creative to our employee ownership. And so we're always thinking about that diversification and the long-term sustainability of our ESEP and what that means to us from a diversification. And one of the things that excites me the most as I think about what we've been doing over the years is that growth and wealth creation that we're doing for the employee owners. I've talked yesterday with several people, and we think about, and many other employee-owned companies, and our generation coming in is thinking a lot about, well, how much money am I making today? We bring a new employee into our company, and they aren't thinking retirement. So we talk about wealth management and how we're helping them to grow their wealth. And the first year you join the company and you're thinking, I don't know, I didn't get a contribution yet. I got to wait 12 months to get into the plan. It's year 2 and 3 when this really starts to become meaningful dollars for those employees. And so it's really working with our communication plan, our communication committee, to educate our employees on what that means to them, what it could mean in 10 to 20 years from now. And so that really excites me about how we can really educate our employees on that wealth building and thinking a little bit more into the future, even though it might not be their retirement in that final stage, but really thinking about that wealth management.
Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move over to California and hear from Aki. Aki?
Yes.
Okay,
Aki.
sorry, Aki. The home care sector, or sectors with minimum wage workers, and the opportunity for retirement savings is so desperate in that particular community or sector. So, you have come up with a very innovative way of bringing more good jobs to this particular demographic, and I'm really anxious to hear more about it and share it.
Well, I'm happy to be here to share it. My background is more in our organization, Filipino Workers Center. I was president for a long time of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, is coming from the worker organizing perspective and how we're transforming an industry for better jobs and dignity on the job. So we've had to do a lot of policy work, a lot of organizing, leadership development, but I'm really excited about how worker ownership and the co-op has come in as a really important strategy for how we're transforming these industries. For a long time, we've been fighting and helping workers to get back wages. This is an industry that is plagued by wage theft. To give you an idea, we have commonly workers who are working for less than $3 an hour with no overtime, working 24-hour-a-day shifts. And many who are doing this job in California and across the country are also immigrants in the industry. Part of the issue is that we have a population that is aging here in the country. Every 8 seconds, someone turns 65 as the baby boomers are hitting retirement. So we have this huge need. Most people want to age at home and in their own communities. But we have a workforce problem because we have a lack of good jobs to really bring people into the sector. So with our cooperative that we're developing, we have a new model that is, parts of it have been developed over the last decade of an LLC cooperative where workers are earning as owners, not as employees, that creates an inclusiveness for everyone who is doing the jobs in this industry, no matter their immigration status. So we have built and we incubated a home care cooperative called Courage Home Care in Los Angeles that's been operating successfully since 2015. But now we've embarked on building a scaled model. The LLCs can only get so big and meant to be manageable and for other legal reasons. So now we're creating and using a secondary cooperative and actually even a tertiary cooperative structures to create, in a way, a kind of franchise, but not a franchise, where the LLC cooperatives, the local cooperatives, will be member owners of a secondary cooperative. And the secondary cooperative provides the shared infrastructure of marketing, of the shared brand, of back office, of technical assistance, because it is bringing in workers who may also have language and tech skills, are experts in what they do in providing the care, but also don't have the expertise to necessarily sometimes build these businesses. So building out a structure that can help. We have a whole academy as well that helps to grow their own skills and build a structure that already has a lot of best practices, systems that they can be trained into, so that each of the local co-ops can really get off and running and build a viable business in their local market as a part of this larger scaled model, so that we can really make an impact on a larger level in this industry. And once we conquer California, we'll bring it, other places, into other parts of the industries. And I think what's really exciting is that it's a model that is helping to transform jobs. I don't think cooperatives have been as much used in low-wage industries, right? To really transform. Not only we need unions, we need organizing, but this is a way to actually create the jobs and what we want to see in the industry, instead of just fighting the bad jobs.
Thank you so much. We can't wait to get you to Illinois. Corey, the NCEO has grown extraordinarily over the decades that you've been affiliated. And in a few weeks, you have a sold-out conference of 2,300.
Well, we would have if we'd had space. 1,900 is all we had room for.
Okay. So what are you excited about in terms of growth opportunities? And thank you for your continued vision and thinking through ways to continue to grow.
So, for us as an organization, of course, we want more ESOPs. If you're not a member, then you can help us grow by going to nco.org and joining. That would help us grow. We're different, I should say, for those who aren't familiar with us. We're different from typical nonprofits in that I never wanted us to be funded by charities or foundations, so we never sought that money. We operate like a business, and we've actually been successful in that term, so we've grown quite a bit. But I really would go back to what I said earlier. The growth opportunities for this movement, and hence for us, is really ESOPs getting bigger. And of course, more ESOPs would be good, but the big opportunity, the supercharging opportunity, is going to be through the sorts of things that Chris is doing, because it's such an attractive opportunity for the companies who are being bought. And it would be really helpful if there were more financial systems that were supporting those kinds of acquisitions, particularly acquisitions of a larger scale where financing might be needed. So the idea of an employee ownership bank, or we were hearing yesterday about the Employee Equity Investment Act. I think if these kinds of innovations in finance can succeed, that we'll see this movement grow substantially over what it is. And the other thing that I think is a real opportunity for growth is I want to emphasize what I said yesterday, and I hope some of you will take to heart. You heard about these state programs like in Ohio. Ohio started because one guy decided that this was a good thing to do, and he made it happen. Colorado and Washington happened because one person went to a legislator and said, this is a really good idea, it's popular, it's effective, and it doesn't cost much. How about introducing legislation on this? Now, to be clear, it's not simply a matter of getting an idea and then it passes. It's a lot of work. But it starts with that. And all of you have the opportunity to do that. Go find your legislator. Go find somebody on the appropriate committee and say, here's a really interesting idea. Take somebody from a local ESOP company with you to meet with that legislator, preferably someone in their district. And you can really make a difference. It all happens because one person gets started on it. So I hope some of you will take that to heart.
Go ahead.
Actually, I would love to carry off of that, Corey. You and I have had several conversations recently about the acquisitiveness of ESOP. So the concept of an ESOP acquiring another company or an ESOP-owned business acquiring has been around for a long time. ESOPs haven't, but this idea of a diversified holding company seems to be really taking much more attention recently. I mean, we've been around for 9 years. Some of you may have heard of Houchins. They're one of the largest diversified ESOP holding companies in the country, and they've been making acquisitions for many years too. We are focused on middle market, so our whole strategy really looks at continuing to grow employee ownership. A lot of you who are doing research and understanding that, and the NCEO is thinking about number of ESOPs in the country, and we're thinking number of employee ownerships. So we want to continue to grow employee ownership that way. And looking for those right fit companies that are going to fit into an existing employee ownership culture is really important. Obviously, we need financially healthy as we're continuing to think about long-term sustainability in that process. Culture is key. The other thing that's a growing trend in the industry is the idea of ESOPs acquiring ESOPs. This is something I've been talking with our associations and our professionals about for quite some time now because it becomes very complicated. Going out and acquiring a company that exists today from a seller, yes, we need some financing for it. They might need a seller's note. M&A gets involved. We can do that. But now bringing ESOPs together to prevent that ESOP that's been around for 5, 10, 15 years, didn't do succession planning yet. Now they're like, well, the CEO is getting ready to really move on this time. The board doesn't have another leader in place. Let's not get PE involved to buy that ESOP that now needs to sell. And the first round, all those employees get a payout, but that's a short-term process. We didn't think about the long-term sustainability of that employee ownership, that ESOP. So really, the idea of bringing ESOPs more together and getting ESOPs to merge with each other is a really growing trend that we really are focusing in our associations to continue to grow that employee ownership and keep the number of employees in ownership growing within the community. So just something that if you can tell, I'm a little passionate about when it comes to that area, and really advocating for continuing to have that type of a culture. So at OwnersEdge, we think about, we all have the same dream. If you go out to our website, you're going to see it's all about the American dream that each one of our employee owners will have at some point in their life, but we're different companies within that dream. And so we keep all of our individual cultures intact and want to continue to grow our businesses and bring more employee owners together.
Thank you. Chris, I think another growing conversation is how, and you used the word sustainability, is how you stay private. And it does take key initiatives in leadership and talent development, capitalization, and strategy. With your conferences, I know because I've been to them, you have so many sessions on continued technical education and resources, but I would love your perspective on how you stay private, stay employee-owned or other.
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know if there's a magic bullet. I think it's working with companies to develop a plan. So many companies kind of, we all do it. Even as leaders of our organizations, we focus on the important stuff, right, that's happening now. So it's a lot about planning, we've done some sessions at our conference and had some conversations around how you fund a repurchase so that it's not this looming disaster, but rather something that's being planned for effectively. I think some of it is beyond our control. It's the economy, stupid, I guess, to paraphrase, right? That sometimes drives things. It's industry-wide things. But and I think there's a culture aspect too, right? The longest lasting ESOP companies we have in Ohio, I think, have done that because they built an amazing culture that feeds on itself. It's a what do they call it? A self-feeding loop, or kind of thing, right? And so a lot of those good things keep on happening, right? And people, they have the internal capacity to react effectively to COVID, right? Or all of those kind of things. So again, I don't know if there's so many. When I was looking at the topics for today, so many of these things have multifaceted answers. I don't know if there's a single piece, right? But it's all of those things combined, and hopefully we're able to do that with the education and the training that we provide as well. So,
Thank you. Adee, I know from my time in the ESOP space, we can spend so much time trying to describe what it is to an owner, and Chris referenced so appropriately how difficult it is to communicate and perpetuate that communication with employees. Cooperatives seems even more challenging, or secondary cooperatives. How are you going about that?
Well, we're creating visuals to help break down the structure.
With how many languages, right?
With many languages in our advisory board, our worker advisory board, we have 3 different languages: English, Spanish, Tagalog, and Nepali that we do translation in. And so it is very complex. And in talking with workers and with organizations, it's like bringing together these different worlds of structure and business then with the daily lives and realities of home care workers. So it is very complex for myself. I've had to learn a lot of it myself. So we know that, like, in this sector, we're going to have extra special training and support to be able to support workers to come into these roles. And we're creating something that is a bit new. A lot of people don't think of or don't know about the LLC cooperative model, for example. So it's doing education and breaking down what is that, what does it do, and then what are the limitations, and then how we're building the secondary structures to support and grow and scale the LLC model. And then what also is more complicated is how it fits in with other things that we're doing, like developing and leveraging workforce development dollars to do the training and do actually education about cooperative governance and how to be a worker owner integrated with the skills development, and doing on-the-job training through a cooperative, so that you're not only getting the experience of doing home care, you're also getting the experience of being a cooperative owner at the same time. So developing models that can leverage a lot of the assets that we've been building, so that so it is a fairly complicated model, and we have a lot of big dreams for it. It doesn't. I think what may be a little bit different too is that this cooperative model we don't see as the solution for transforming everything. It has to be in relationship with the other things that we're doing in terms of lifting the floor of the laws and protections for workers, because our competition is operating on a business model that's based on wage theft, right? And actually building political and voice and power to shift the environment in the industry itself. And actually, I see what we're building in terms of our skilled cooperative model is also a powerful political voice to be able to impact and speak on the industry in a different way than just worker organizations alone could also do, because they're not only workers, they are worker owners who are running the business of it as well and showing by example how things can be different.
Can you share a story of how life or work might be different for a worker owner compared to what you'd seen previously in your career?
Yes. So So in our membership as Filipino Workers Center, we've asked our members who here is actually earning minimum wage, getting all of their protections, overtime pay, and where we've had no one in the room raise their hand that that's their reality. Now, because we have the cooperative, when we ask that question, we have cooperative members, worker owners, who can raise their hands. So, for example, one of the member owners, Fatima, she's working in the private industry through an agency, home care agency, was working 5 days a week, 24-hour shifts straight through, 5 days. And when she came to the co-op, for a time she was working 3 days a week. During COVID, it had to be 24 hours. We try and shift so that people aren't working 24 hours, but during COVID, that was necessary. And what she was earning working 3 days a week in the cooperative in 1 month would have taken her 3 months in the private home care agency working 5 days a week before. And she has dental and vision. She's actually able to take paid days off because the power dynamic also in the private sector is like, it's very hard to actually, even though you have the right to, hard to ask for your paid day off because of the dynamic, because maybe they just won't ask you back, if you're asking for your paid days. So it shifts actually the power dynamic because they are the worker owners that they can then take their paid days off. They have holiday pay, and they actually have, they're running it. They're seeing where their money is going. It's not just going to an owner, but it's actually they get to make the decisions together. They also build care teams together, which is very different. They're kind of just like thrown out there, usually in the private market, but in Courage, they're building care teams that actually then creates a space where they have a community that doesn't only improve their own quality of life, it improves the quality of care as well that they're providing to the client.
Very exciting. Thank you. Chris, you had mentioned.
The gentleman has a question.
Oh, sorry.
He's raising his hand.
There we go. Oh, Mr. Keeling.
I just wanted to throw in great panel. The 3 C's are amazing. They're talking about something that's bothered me a long time. Visited 592 ESOP companies in my career. Yes, some were sick puppies, some were fake, some were no good. The vast majority were overwhelming. And so many of them, I've talked loud anyway, so many of them don't exist anymore. Now, some of the sick puppies went away. That's fine. But many of them were good companies. And the repurchase obligation would drain their ability to make the capital improvements in the organization, the mechanical things, expand, et cetera, et cetera. And the ESOP terminated, went away, because they couldn't handle the financial demands. All 3 of the C's brought something forward, especially Chris and Corey, and Greg. They must have our nation, if you're going to be dedicated to an amazing, wonderful way to improve the income, improve the lifestyle of most Americans who work, that become employee-owned, the repurchase obligation issue, those companies have it grow and grow and grow. And I think that this panel has put things on the table that can start addressing, particularly Chris, can start addressing this problem that I saw in the nearly 30 years that I visited ESOP companies. Yes, some were sick puppies. Don't get me wrong. Some were done flim-flammery. And I also go back to, yes, one person was named Russell Long, an amazing person who was able to listen to another one person, Lou Kelso, to create the model of broad-based employee ownership. And so never underestimate new ideas innovation, etc. But you guys have hit on something that really rang a bell with me, because being in 592 companies, and so many of them don't exist. The 100 that are listed that y'all did, Corey, and the list that's provided, I visited 25 of those companies. There are others that would be on that list if they were still employee-owned. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. Jen from Hypertherm, when you spoke yesterday, one time when I visited Hypertherm, one of the executives said, Mary, if we don't grow, we die, because as your expenses go up, just inflation and whatnot, your margins are going to shrink. So companies are paying attention to it. So thank you, and thank you guys for paying attention to that. There's a question in the back there.
I had a question for Adee. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, because everyone else will be in the breakout.
Workers and black and brown workers in particular could really are needed. This movement is needed for them in particular, and so I really appreciate you know, the groundbreaking work you're doing there. I had a question because we started to do this kind of work in farm labor as well, and so similar sort of circumstances of highly exploited marketplace, you know, wage theft, all the same issues that I think your workers go through. And so one of the challenges was just that you're in a market of bottom feeders, right? And you're competing with those bottom feeders. So our workers, the challenge was, you know, they had to move around a lot to get work, right? They've got 2 or 3 different employers, and they follow the work. So the loyalty to the company, the EO model is interesting because if you get loyalty to the company, then you can build up a system that actually like addresses a lot of the inequalities, but then also provides quality services to the market, to the farmers. So one of the questions I have is just, how did you stabilize your market to be able to provide continuous employment for your workers so that they stay with you, right? Or is that even something in home care where they have multiple employers and they're chasing jobs all the time? Or is it that they work with one employer? But you can see this is like a repetitive theme in low-wage workers, right? And so to me, EO is so powerful in that space, but the exploitation precludes like real scale. And so just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So it is something that we do still deal with, right? And so part of it is making the model and the business right now work for the current conditions of the market, which means that we're also only going to be able to serve a certain part of the market that can actually afford to pay our co-op prices that provide the good jobs. But because there's this like growing need, there's actually a good market there for us to be able to build a real niche. And we don't have as much the geographic traveling problem, but it is about needing to create enough of scale of available jobs that they can continuously work in the cooperative as well. And so that's why it's really important for us to build this scaled model where we can really have investments and expertise brought into marketing to build up enough clientele, as well as then on the other side, enough of the structures that can hold and have the available workers that are ready to provide the services, because usually it's like they need the care yesterday. Right. So at the same time as we're doing like serving that part of the market, we are also as a movement and as PwC, we are also trying to shift things in terms of policy. We know that in an industry that's plagued by wage theft, it's also about underinvestment, because everyone has the need for home care at some point, but not everyone has the resources, right? So it's not a choice of whether you want it or not. So we are also doing policy work to create more public investment in home care. That's another reason why I'm in DC this week, because we are also working with the current administration about federal investments, as well as in California, we're building out a campaign to build a new public benefit of social insurance to address the the issue of affordability. And at the same time, because we are growing it and developing it also with our union partners, we're designing it in a way that our cooperative model will actually be one of the preferential high road agencies that then will be a part of the system.
Other questions right here? Sir. You did.
Hi, I'm Michael Higgins. Hello.
Yep, it's good.
Okay. Michael Higgins. I was at SAIC for many, many years and then ran the Foundation for Enterprise Development for other years, but that was a long time ago. And when, I come to these meetings and I hear these wonderful things going on, but I'm most interested in growth. It seems to me that, Corey, there still hasn't been a lot of growth overall in the number of EO companies and the the impact on the economy. For example, what is the total of revenue of all of your companies combined, and how many people are involved? And Corey, I'd like, if you can, a guess about the same thing. Just how many employee owners are there today, and what's its relative size to the economy?
So it depends on how you count it. So if you look at every employee owner who owns stock in any kind of way, excluding the owning stock through 401k plans in their company, it's about 25 million. So that includes people who are in employee stock purchase plans, who work for companies that give everybody restricted stock or stock options, includes ESOPs, and then some of the smaller iterations on this. So that's a pretty big number. If you look at the number of people, about 25 years ago it would have been smaller, but for the last 10 to 15 years, it's been pretty stagnant. And if you look at private company ESOPs, so arguably the most impactful form of employee ownership, that number grew till about the early 2000s, then it leveled off, and now we've started to see what could be very meaningful growth to now about 2.5 million people. But 2.5 million out of a private sector workforce, I think of it's about 110 million or something. So you're right, it's still a tiny percentage of the total economy, and it's difficult for ESOPs to compete with larger market forces, particularly the growth of private equity, which may become larger than public markets in the not too distant future. And so that's a totally different model, and that model's growing very quickly. So there are real challenges to getting where we need to be. We're a long, long, long way from where we need to be.
And yet every little bit helps. So we are a middle market company, right? So we started at 25 million with about 135 employees. Today we're about 125 million with 350 employees.
Do you have any idea what fraction of your state's economy?
I don't off the top of my head, no. But there's many ESOPs within our community. There's a lot of ESOPs that we work with on a regular basis within the state of Wisconsin. Several more questions.
Ellen, I think you have the mic. The talking stick.
I do. Someone handed it to me. My question is also for Adee, Ellen Frank-Miller. So I have done research and work with other home care agencies, and one of the things we hear all the time is, well, we can't pay them more because that's what Medicare reimbursement rates are, and that's what limits our ability for wages. So I was wondering, it sounds like when you say you have a niche market that can afford it, can you talk just briefly about kind of how you've addressed this limitation that either is a legitimate limitation or a really nice excuse that we hear from other firms?
I mean, that's a reality, especially because for other home care cooperatives who primarily work with their state's program, Medicaid-based program, and that there actually needs to be higher reimbursements through those programs. So those are real and actually need to be campaigns to advocate around. We're in California that also does have like a concentration of like markets and demographics where we can actually make this work. It may be less doable in rural, like we're starting in the urban areas because that's where we have the biggest markets that we can actually compete for. And in California, we actually, our Medicaid program is in-home supports and services that doesn't have an agency model. So it just goes directly to the provider. So as we expand, that's why we need to also grow the program so that we can also include how our model into it. So it is a real thing. I would say it's not just an excuse. We need more investment overall in home care so that everyone can afford to pay workers what they should be paid. And that definitely happens co-ops. In a lot of the co-ops now, they have to for long-term sustainability, ones who are working with their state programs are having to diversify so that they're also doing private pay as well as the Medicaid reimbursements at the same time.
Thank you.
I'm on the board of a company in West Virginia. It's 2,300 employees, a home care company, and they work with Medicare. They have some private, but it's almost all through Medicare, Medicaid. And they're reimbursed at $15 an hour. And they can't, so what can you do if you're in that situation? It's very frustrating for them because they want to pay people more. But there's just limits on what you can do.
And then, so they're competing with the jobs workers who then go to the gas stations instead of home care.
Right, they can make more money at Amazon.
So I think we have time. Thank you.
So we have time for maybe one more question. I do want to bring in our virtual audience. I know there's a number of questions in the room, but maybe you can grab the panelists afterwards. Quick question for Chris. So one of your companies is unionized, and we had a question come in about how unionization works with ESOPs and some of the challenges and opportunities that you see there.
Sure, that's a great question. And actually, it's the original company that started the ESOP back in the late 90s that is the unionized workforce. And so they have always participated 100% in the ESOP plan as well through that process. Granted, they have a collective bargaining agreement, and we negotiate with them every year. And the ESOP has just been part of that process for them. What's really exciting about it is that that's such a legacy business and been around and mature from that perspective, is that we have unionized workers who the value in their ESOP plan today on an annualized basis increases more than the compensation that they're making. And they really show that they actually attract more people coming into our business because they can talk about what it means to be a part of that ESOP community and actually understand that they can contribute to the value of the business. And the gentlemen who have been, or the technicians who have been around for 25 years, talk to the new guys coming in and say, we have a great video on our website of someone who retired about 4 years ago. And he said when he first started, they all told him you should come to this annual meeting where they reveal the shares and you get a statement. And he was like, why should I go? And they said, free beer and free food. He said, I'm in. So he started going to the meetings, and now he's retired and literally living out his American dream based on what he was able to earn over the course of the period of time that he worked for the business.
Thank you, everyone. The panel is around for more questions. Corey, Chris, Adee, and Chris, thank you. This has been extraordinary.